Good morning, everybody. Thank you for starting your Thursday morning office. My name is Tom Hofford, CEO of the Salem Chamber, and it's great to have all of you joining us for a few topics that we will go through today. And I know of great importance is their discussion on our downtown. We'll check in on our legislative session results. We're not very helpful for business, which I know you are all very aware. So with that, Nicole, would you kick us off with our legislative recap?
Sure. Thank you, Tom. Good to see everybody. Thank you for being here this morning. The session is over. I think those of us who lived through it are still recovering. We have a lot of PTSD from that. Indeed. But we did finish. We finished on the Friday before the Sunday deadline, right before midnight. Representative Mannix certainly can speak to the drama of all that was happening. But a few things that we've been talking about throughout the session. Certainly the one that's caught the most attention and has been really continued to be the conversation starter after the session is the failure of the transportation package. It was the #1 priority by the Democrats, and I think the governor coming into the session was to pass another package. The last one we passed was in 2017. We used to call them Connect Oregon. This time was just called a transportation package. It failed right at the very end, I think for a variety of reasons, but I would say that really the primary reason is that the Democrats who have a supermajority, which is the votes you need to pass new taxes, could not hold their caucus together. I'd assumed, and on the way in, that was exactly what they would do. They would hold their votes together. They would pass whatever tax package that they came up with, as well as fees and fines. Fees and fines don't need majority, but taxes do. The package they introduced just 20 days before the end of session, which is very late for something that big to finally show its face, just couldn't do it. And they tried a variety of different mechanisms and maneuvers. In the end, it failed. And I've had this question like, oh my gosh, what happens now? Does everything stop? No, the current mechanisms that are currently in place continue forward. However, nothing new has happened. What do they do now? Certainly you've seen the news stories around ODOT declaring that they're going to be releasing some of their people. None of that takes place until the end of the month, until after July. And then, the question is, what do they do? The governor has certainly made a strong call for a special session. There's no reason, though, to call a special session until you have a deal. You can't make legislators you can make them come back. You can't make them make a deal. So is that out there? Of course it is. Are there conversations? Yes, of course there are. But there's no reason to call it till you have a deal in place and you have the votes. I think ultimately one of the things we did see this session, which was was really interesting actually, is a number of Democrats who did stand in that moderate space and were willing to buck their caucus. And that is not always the case. Certainly we've seen times where there's just no movement, but this time there's a handful of them. It will be interesting to see what happens to them in the next election cycle. Because certainly everyone knows who they are now. Everyone's clearly watching them. I've read a lot of different things from, a variety of different groups on all sides, but it was a very interesting dynamic happening. So it's very much a wait and see right now. I think that at least, speaking for my clients, looking at the transportation package, it was just too big, too much to stomach in there. I think a little brazen to think you could roll that out just a few weeks before the end of session and roll it on through, and it didn't. They did try a last minute small increase in the gas tax, but the funds would have only gone to the Department of Transportation. They would have not moved to local government, and that ultimately killed that one too. I've been asked a lot about the city of Salem's request for dollars to backfill the services that the city provides. I think if I remember, I think this is right. This is the third time I think that Salem's asked for it. This is the third time. They were looking for funds in the Christmas tree bill. The technical name is the budget reconciliation bill, and the city was unsuccessful with that, which is unfortunate. I have not had the conversation. Tom and I haven't had a chance to really dig in and talk about that. I'm interested in what the city will choose to do with that going into the future, but they were unsuccessful there. We talked about transient lodging tax, but I don't have to talk about that. I'm going to let my friend Greg talk about that when it's his turn. But a couple of other things that we've talked about during the session. House Bill 2688, prevailing wage. For those who are in the building world, not the building trades, but the builder side of it, this was a terrible bill. It did pass, House Bill 2688. The bill as it was, sent on to us, I represent modular housing interest, so that was kind of my dog in that fight, as well as with the chamber, is that it was supposed to be narrowly directed to bespoke construction. However, as the bill is drafted, it's very broad. It now goes into a rulemaking process, and we're going to see what happens. We worked very hard on it. We flipped some Democrats, which we felt good about, but not quite enough. So the bill did pass and will extend that definition of prevailing wage to a broad of elements within the construction and building world. Senate Bill 216, unemployment insurance for striking workers in public and private employment, did pass 10 weeks after the 2-week waiting period here in Oregon. Oregon is the first state where that extends to public. Other states who pass this, it's only been to private employees. In Oregon, it will now be to public employees as well. House Bill 2092, which our friend John Hawkins from REDW CPAs had come to talk to you about, Reconnect, which is the Oregon's traditional reconnect to the federal tax code. That bill had passed out of the House with a different, today we're going to kind of come up with our own idea of how we want to deal with the definitions of federal taxable income for the purpose of our state taxes. Interestingly enough, it went into the Senate Finance and Revenue Committee chaired by Mark Meek, one of our more moderate Democrats, and he let the bill die. So Oregon continues with the rolling reconnect as we have operated under the definitions in federal tax code will continue to be the same definitions in the state tax code. That does not mean, and I have heard this from different legislators, that they couldn't come back during the interim and try to do something else. So, but right now we go back to rolling reconnect. We stay right where we have been. Fire service, as well as a number of different entities, including in forestry and timber and different things that come in with a fairly large package. Again, looking at a number of different taxes or different sources of revenue to try to figure out the issue of how to fund wildfire. The large packages failed. They passed a small bill with the ZIN tax, as we call it, or oral nicotine products at 65 cents. It's not to the level of what they had hoped for it to be, and it has a number of different places where those dollars will go, but they did pass that one. We had talked a little bit about Senate Bill 1166, which is rideshare, something I worked on really hard. This one would have created a wage standard for the independent contractors who are drivers within Uber and Lyft. It would have proposed the highest threshold for that in the entire country. Here in Oregon, it would have been a statewide application. We killed that bill in startling fashion. So I feel really, really good about that. However, it will come back. And we know it's coming back in 26. We're starting to work now. There'll be interim work on it. I think what's interesting about it, we've had this conversation, is how it does really look at independent contractor in a different way. And as we see this idea of wage standard coming across in a variety of different industries that do look at independent contractor. So I talked to one of the co-chairs of Ways and Means. They said, we're really, we're trying to make independent contractors something that it's not. So how do we, how does that actually work? So it's good. Interesting to see, but we did get that one. A few other things just as large topic of water I've been asked a lot about. It does appear the governor has a very interesting interest in water. I come from a cattle ranch timber operation, so water was everything for us and our water rights. So it's been an interesting one to watch. There was a bill that was passed, I believe, if I remember correctly, at Senate Bill 1154. And it would make changes to how the state manages areas with impaired groundwater based on what had happened out in Eastern Oregon. The interest groups who were working on it were able to remove some of the limitations that were in the bill to try to make it a better bill. But there is a strong interest in this. And we had talked about some bills that were proposed around wells, around springs, different things like that. So a topic that's clearly out there and up here, people are thinking about it, and it'll be interesting to see how that one moves forward. I think out of that, those are kind of the big ones. I would say this year's budget reconciliation package or the Christmas tree bill is the smallest one I've seen in a long time. Did not see services programs supported through it. It was very small and huge set aside, set over here for the just in case. What happens with changes in the federal administration? What may the state need to or want to supplement, backfill, into the future, which caused this very cautious approach to the entire session, to what they funded, to what bills they allowed through, to what happened. So even very small requests that had, small dollar amounts coming in for the Christmas tree bill were not funded. The things that were funded were very much strong on capital. It's a one-time expenditure and that's it. There's no question that you're not gonna come back and ask for another fire station. It's just one. So it was an interesting perspective, and I know that Representative Mannix will certainly have much more insight than I am privy to. But we really appreciate all of you who engage, who ask questions. Tom and Jameson are so great about responding. They get a lot of requests for the chamber to weigh in, and I appreciate people add to that conversation and bring insight as well as lean in when the chamber needs to. And we're gearing up now. Some of my clients were already working on the bills that we're going to move in the 26th session. The transportation package remains out there. How they deal with that, what they're going to try to do before we come back in February is, I think, really kind of that little cloud that's sitting here over the interim. Next year, we start the campaign cycle. It's an election year. Governor's up for election. Of course, all House members are up for election. Half the Senate will be up for election. So it's a big year. It will be the last year without campaign finance that was passed, unless there's some change that's made. So it's not going to be dull. But with that, I'm happy to answer any question.
I think we'll get a full session recap. So we'll allow Greg Astley and then Representative Mannix, and then we'll take questions on the session. So Greg, if you wouldn't mind hopping in.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom. Thank you for having me here today. It's nice to see a lot of familiar faces. I was mentioning I used to come to these on a regular basis, and I had forgotten how jarring it is to have to be up and awake at 7 a.m. and ready to talk to everybody. So thank you all for being here. And thank you for your support during the session. Tom mentioned it. We worked very closely together, and quite honestly, the threats to the transient lodging tax this time, we could not have fought them off without help from folks like you in communities like Salem. We relied very heavily on our partners in the chambers and the destination management organizations to show up and testify and tell their story. And we're going to need to continue that. We expect the threats to continue in the short session. Both of the chief sponsors of two of the bills that really got the furthest this time have already said they'll be back in the 2026 session. Nicole mentioned this was kind of a rough session for those of us who went through it. We're still recovering. There were almost 3,500 bills that were dropped at the beginning of this session, the most that's been done in a couple of decades. Of that, about 20% were study bills. And what that means is that they're basically placeholders for what's called a gut and stuff. So as long as you have content that's related to the relating to clause, in our case, let's say local taxation, you can take out whatever was in there, say a study on local taxation, which is all it would have to say, and put in whatever you want. And that actually happened in one of the cases with our TLT bills. So it's one of those issues that I don't think is going to go away. Their legislators will tell you that they intend to study or they don't know exactly what they need. And in some cases, you have duplicate bills. We had several TLT bills on the Senate side that were exactly the same as what was on the House side. They can't talk pre-session to decide what they're going to file. So oftentimes we end up with bills that are exactly the same. When it came to the TLT, there were 8 bills that were related to TLT this session. One of them we worked with Representative Anna Scharf on. It was very specific. It was for Polk County Fairgrounds, basically. They collect probably less than $200 in transient lodging tax a year, which doesn't make it really feasible for them to take that money, take out the administrative fee, pay for all the other stuff that has to happen, and then distribute the money. And so there was a very specific bill that said if you had an RV campground that had less than 50 spots, that had water and sewer hookup, then the TLT money could just be put right back into that facility. And so that unfortunately did not go anywhere. We believe it was one of those bills that was kind of held hostage. The transportation package was really the lever for a lot of the legislation that didn't pass this time, in our opinion. There were, again, bills that were duplicates, a couple of bills that we've seen before. Senator David Brock Smith on the coast, He would like to take some of the money from the state parks on the coast and put that into what he calls an ocean beach fund that would then pay for signage and cleanup on the ocean beaches. I think this is at least the second or third session that he's proposed that. That died. The two major bills that did pass through the House and got over to the Senate side, the first was House Bill 2977. The chief sponsor was Representative Ken Helm. Initially, it would have increased the statewide lodging tax by 1%, and that money would have gone to the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife for species conservation. ODF&W has a $300 million budget already, but they wanted another $30 million or $40 million from the statewide TLT to pay for species conservation. That bill, after it passed out of the House and went over to the Senate, there was another amendment that added another 0.25% that was then split between 8 different sub-accounts, 4 different state agencies. It included prevention of invasive species. It included money for anti-poaching. And in a move to try to get some Republicans, it included money for payment for wolf depredation. So cattle ranchers whose stock are killed by wolves, they did pass a bill that said that they would pay them for that up to a certain amount of money, but they have the money to do that. And so their solution was to add it to the statewide TLT. Now, if you can tell me what the nexus is between the statewide TLT and wolves killing cattle, I'd be happy to hear it, but we just don't see it. So the other bill, 3962, which was actually a bill that we killed on the House side. Originally, it was 3556, and that was one of those that became a gut and stuff. When it was on the House side, would have changed the definition. So right now, post 2003, any new or increase to a TLT at a city or county level is split 70% going to tourism, marketing, promotion, or facilities. 30% is unrestricted. Now, prior to 2003, whatever a city or county was spending on tourism was locked in after legislation was passed in that year. But what that means is that for many cities and counties, they're getting upwards of 60, 70, or even 80% unrestricted. And that's one of those uphill battles that we have in the legislature to try to explain, because the cities and counties will talk about the 70-30 split, but it's not a true 70-30 split. Bend, as an example, has 65% unrestricted. Ashland has 69% unrestricted. They can spend it however they want. Plus, they have a 5% meals tax in Ashland. Many of the cities on the coast are over 50%, and in some cases, they're above 80% unrestricted, and yet they still wanted more money, more flexibility with this. 3962 would have changed the definition, well, excuse me, when it was 3556, would have changed the definition of tourism-related facilities to include public safety and infrastructure. So roads, sewers, police, the DA, all of those. Now, as you might imagine, and I'm sure many of you have seen the public safety budget for the city of Salem, paying for public safety with TLT dollars is a drop in the bucket. Mayor Joe Benetti, who's a former restaurant owner in Coos Bay, said, our TLT revenue is about $700,000 for the city of Coos Bay, and that's the largest city on the coast. His PERS payments alone for public safety are over $6 million. So you can imagine if he's trying to pay for a public safety budget with TLT dollars, it's not going to go anywhere. And roads are the same situation. When we killed 3556 in the House, it became 3962. It was gut and stuff, as I mentioned. Eventually, in the Dash 14 amendments, which were released an hour before the committee met, it changed again. Instead of a 70-30 split, it said 60% is going to be unrestricted to the cities and counties. 40% would go to the tourism, marketing, promotion, and facilities. But it also said that anything that you did prior to 2003 was also on the table, which meant that for some communities, they could go back and readjust so that they were getting much more than that. And one of the things that we also had to explain is when you're talking about facilities in particular, if that facility is being paid for with bonding money that's being paid for with the TLT, you can't cut that budget. You can't stop paying the bonding payments. But what that means is that even more money is going to be taken away from marketing and promotion. And of course, the counter argument was, well, Oregon's an amazing place. People are still going to come here. Pepsi and Coca-Cola spend $1 billion each every year on marketing. You think people don't know what Coke and Pepsi do? No. We're competing with 49 other states. And in Colorado, when they cut their statewide marketing budget for tourism, it took them 15 years to get back to where they were. $2 billion lost in Colorado because they cut their tourism and marketing budget. We know they're coming back in 2026. We have a lot of work to do to help educate legislators on the real numbers. In fact, that's one of the problems. The Legislative Revenue Office, which is a totally nonpartisan group out of the legislature, testified at an informational hearing before the House committee and said, there's no one source to find how this money is being expended. We can't go out and say, here's a report that tells you exactly who's getting what and how it's being spent. So really, nobody knows. I mean, the cities and counties have some idea, but we don't have a comprehensive report from anybody that would tell you exactly how that money is being spent, how much, we know how much is being collected from the Department of Revenue, but we just don't know how it's being dispersed. And until we know those numbers, it's really counterproductive to try to have a conversation about changing percentages or trying to reallocate dollars in that way. So a lot of difficult conversations. Unfortunately, some of it got personal in this legislative session, which was very disappointing to see. So we have to kind of deal with that moving forward. But TLT was a big issue for us in 25 years of being in that legislative building. I've never seen more acrimonious behavior out of some of the members, and really the threats to the hospitality industry, which is still recovering, quite honestly. I know it's hard to believe, but post-pandemic, restaurants and hotels are still suffering. We are not at occupancy levels to pre-2019 levels still in Oregon. And many restaurants are still just barely hanging on. So with all that doom and gloom, I will tell you that we did defeat those bills, which is a good thing. There were some other bills that came up, no taxes on tips, which was Senator Dick Anderson from the coast, an idea that he had during the presidential election. That didn't go anywhere. There was a bill that would have required employers to pay out credit card tips within 24 hours to servers. That bill didn't go anywhere. There were other bills. The striking workers bills was something that we were kind of involved with, but not kind of on the tip of the spear, if you will. So those were some of the major ones. I guess the last two that I would say, we still don't have liability reform here in Oregon. And so for a lot of our resorts, that's going to be incredibly difficult. Oregon's an outlier. The states around us have liability reform. So if you go to a ski resort and you sign a waiver in Washington, that ski resort is protected. The waiver says, I accept the risk. In Oregon, that waiver doesn't mean anything. We've had too many cases where people have gotten hurt, sued, and been able to collect money. We still don't have liability reform in Oregon, and we need it. We need it desperately. We had another insurer leave state, which is, we're now down to one insurer for major ski resorts and other outdoor recreation, which is going to be incredibly difficult moving forward. So the other one is we did not get labor standards. And for anybody that was familiar with the FAST Act out of California, they created an unelected labor standards board that was able to set working hours, wages, working conditions for a segment of the population. In this case, it was fast food workers. We saw that in this session for both agricultural workers and long-term healthcare workers. We expect that that's probably coming for our industry, but this was not a session passed. It will come back again, undoubtedly. So with that, I'll leave it go. I'm sure the representative has a lot more to talk about. So thank you.
Greg. Representative Mannix.
Thank you. Good.
Behind Oz's wallet, sir.
All right. Morning. But I don't have an hour and a half. So
Need to extend you a little extra time here.
no, I'm just, and I'll be glad to come back and have further conversations. I'm happy to serve in the Oregon House of Representatives. And I say that because I campaigned and asked people to elect me, and I went there to represent them. But I try to tell my friends in the Chamber of Commerce, there's 60 seats in the House of Representatives. 36 of them are held by Democrats in Democrat plurality districts. 21 are held by Republicans in Republican plurality districts, and some of that's redistricting. 3 of us Republicans represent Democrat plurality districts, and I'm one of them. And I mention that because we've been reaching out, we've been trying to make a difference. So Representative Helfrich and Representative Javati, it's actually, you can pronounce it a variety of ways. That's the way it's spelled, but it's Javati. And myself all represent districts where there are Democrats than Republicans. And we've insisted in that background on making ourselves as effective as possible in terms of negotiations and trying to stop bad things from happening, help good things to happen. And in that mix, this session, the phrase that came to mind for me is killing us softly. You know the song Killing Me Softly? Killing us softly. A wave of legislation coming forward where, I'll say this, the left-wing Democrats have more influence among the Democrat caucus than ever before. And they're coming in and they always have the best of intentions. The strike bill is a great example. I'm being sarcastic here. Isn't it too bad that people who choose to go on strike don't have any money other than whatever their unions can provide to them? Well, they choose to go on strike. They choose to not work. Usually, if you quit your job and you're not working, you don't get unemployment compensation. But oh no, we need to be compassionate and provide strikers with unemployment compensation. Oh, it was compromised to bring it down to not as long. I'm being sarcastic because we fought it on the floor. And I used public employees because I have more public employees in my district than any other representative. I've got county, city, and state. I've got Kaiser and North Salem. Public employees who choose to strike, we're going to pay them unemployment compensation when they're not doing their job. I tried to carry that message, and I won't go on and on about it, but it really bugs me that we proceeded with this. But then I look at, we kept it down to, I think, just 31 votes in favor in the House. And I saw some moderate Democrats uncomfortably voting yes because the leadership told them we need those 31 votes. And what I'm getting at here is part of the psychology for the future is reaching out to those more moderate Democrats and letting them know, got your backs too. And it caucus versus the Republican caucus, there should be what I call the Oregon caucus. And I will use an example. The last day of session, I was able to get through a bill to reform the estate tax that actually passed Thursday afternoon. Additional reform to the estate tax to tighten up the $15 million exemption for farms and ranches and woodlands. And attorneys and accountants had come to me saying, we really need to do this to lock in the good reform we got from 2023. And we got it through Thursday afternoon. And we got enough Democrats to vote for it. But on Friday, I went around the House as we have a lot of quiet time. I talked to 45 representatives and 37 of them said, I'll sign up the Estate Tax Reform Caucus. I said, no meetings. I just want us to start sharing ideas because we need to reform the estate tax. So got a great bill through for the technical side for farms, ranches, and woodlands. And there are no farms, ranches, or woodlands in my district. It's for Oregon. But I talked to enough legislators say, come on now, what about increasing the exemption? We have the worst estate tax in the United States. What kind of signal are we sending? So pause on that, talk about a caucus, see what we can do next session. But within the next few days, I am filing an initiative to kill the death tax, to totally remove the estate tax. Why? Because we ought to do it. 38 states in the last 22 years have eliminated their estate taxes. 12 are left. We have the worst. And we'll see how it goes. But what I'm getting at is that is the initiative process. Why? Because I saw that the leadership, they let me reform, I'll call the farms, ranches, and woodlands piece. They wouldn't touch doing anything else the estate tax. Well, maybe the citizens will if we talk about it as a death tax. And I don't want to go off on a rampage about it, but there are two issues where I'm going to seek an initiative. That's one of them. because I think we can win on that and we'll certainly create leverage with the legislature. Pay attention to the death tax. We are driving successful people out of the state because when they start looking at it, well, I might as well live in Nevada and then I can vacation just under 6 months a year in Oregon. And I'll be no longer paying the Oregon income tax because I don't reside here except for Oregon income. I'm getting off on it. I want you to know though, if you are interested in help to repeal the death tax, send me an email, kevin@mannixlawfirm.com, because we will be moving forward with it. The other one is public safety. Now, I did try to get us to address broken windows, and I have all the information from the chief and from others about what we need to do, and we need to spend some money on law enforcement. Well, two things. One is, and I'll talk about transportation briefly. As I work the transportation issue, I also work what I call transportation safety. And I convinced the leadership there ought to be 2 transportation safety sectors in Salem based on the river, which is transportation, the Portland and Western Rail Line, that's all the west side. To the south, how about Mission Street? To the east, how about the Union Pacific Line? Further east, how about Lancaster Drive and the Market and Street intersection up there with I-5. The sectors identified were 2 sectors with the worst crime problems in Salem: Northeast Salem, Lancaster, Market, and all of the downtown area. And the transportation safety, well, these are all transportation corridors, aren't they? So don't we need to have state money go to Salem? And the proposal was $10 million for transportation safety in Salem. That was going to be separate legislation. I mention this because the way I work is, to the extent we're trying to get things done, what else can we do? And I had the leadership convinced, all right, if we're able to do this other stuff on transportation, we should be looking at safety, a different kind of safety, the safety of the community. That hasn't happened. But the last day of session, House Bill 2316 passed. That is my housing bill that I got the governor to support. It got a unanimous vote in the House. It got a 28-1 vote in the Senate. And what does it do? We've identified 3,500 acres of state-owned land within urban growth boundaries all over the state that's not being used. And we're going to sell it for affordable housing. Sell it to whom? To the business developers who want to develop housing. And we've created a number of provisions in there to make it easier and to get DAS, which will be administering the Department of Administrative Services, as they're making money, they can turn around and provide grants to communities for livability. And what does that include? Police and fire. We have a lot of state acreage in Salem. When we're selling it and money's being made by the state, it's being kept in a fund. And we're going to turn around and then be able to help communities with police and fire. Now, it's going to take a year to a year and a half. What I'm getting at is we try to look for ways to navigate the process, do something good. We will have more housing built because we're going to make it available to the private sector, to developers to build housing. And guess what? The benefit to the cities, remember, none of this property is paying property taxes, right? So we say to the buyer, 5 years, you don't have to pay property taxes on the land, but after that, you're paying property taxes. 2 years, you pay property taxes on what you build, but after that, you pay property taxes. The cities looked at this and said, that's 3,500 acres of land that over the next couple of years, next 5 years at least, are going to be starting to pay property taxes. Now, I get off on this because I'm looking for how you navigate this process to get results. Now, I've got a dozen things I'd want to talk about, but I just want to use it as an example of how you can engage and take a capitalist notion and make things happen. As we did that, some of you know, we also recognize the wetlands mitigation system is a mess, takes too long. There's other issues that arise that we're going to need to address. So that I don't run over my time, I'm watching the calendar, the clock here.
I can't even believe I'm saying this. Representative Mannix, you have 10 more minutes.
Oh my God.
And that,
You're welcome.
it's got to be a person.
So let me give you the machine gun thing after I give you one picture. Transportation. You read that I voted for the transportation package in committee. That was a mistake. That was a mistake. I was trying to get everyone engaged in the issue. And I spoke out for it and I said, all right, I'll vote for this. I should not have done that. I was trying to negotiate a better bill. A week earlier, I had proposed a transportation package that didn't tax automobiles, that didn't increase all kinds of fees, but did tax through a road usage charge all those electric cars out there that aren't paying the gas tax. In any event, it was a mistake because everyone was, what the heck is going on here? And I shouldn't have done that. I should have voted no in committee, but I was trying to engage so we could make a difference on all of these issues. And then Friday night, the alternative bill came up and we killed it. I was among those who killed it. Why? Because it only gave a 3-cent gas tax to the state, to ODOT, didn't give anything to the cities or counties. And usually the formula's 50% state, 30% county, 20% city. It didn't do that. It also didn't do a thing about road usage charges, which is a big deal because we'll have more and more electric cars out there paying nothing for the wear and tear on the roads. So we killed it. Now that has set the stage for a new conversation about transportation. And I spoke to the speaker 2 days ago about this. You know, what do we do to come up with a refined, simple package that addresses the real needs? Our transit friends are out there worrying about what's going to happen, and I agree with that worry. And yes, whether or not you agree with what the governor's doing with these layoffs at ODOT, there's a very severe message there. One thing is the legislature has created these restrictions on how you move funds. The road usage, the road taxes have to be used for roads. There's other revenues that might be used for roads, but we said they can't be. So there is a way of changing those rigid barriers. Something else to remember. The general fund is actually up. All the economic projections are things are going to be tough. It's going down. We increased funding for education by 11%. So we need to go back and revisit this mix. Don't people want their roads taken care of? Can't we do something about that? There's nothing that says we can't use the general fund for roads. There is something that says the gas tax can only be used for roads. So I'm saying the flexibility hasn't been built into this, and we will be revisiting this issue, I think, in a special session. And yes, because I've taken a collegial approach, I intend to be engaged. I talked to the governor about this housing bill. I talked to the Democrats about it. We got it through. Now we need to make sure it's effectively implemented. It goes into effect September 26th. I want to hear from developers about on the private sector side as to how that can be done. But on transportation, I have said, please, no one objects to making electric cars pay a road usage charge as long as we're not tracking where everybody's driving. And there are ways you can do that without knowing, you know, where did you go? We don't have to use GPS to have you pay a road usage charge. And I won't give you the 10-minute speech about that. It can be done, and it can be done in a way where your privacy is respected, but you're paying your fair share. So that should be a component. And without going into the rest of it, a simpler transportation bill could be done so we're not laying off ODOT employees who are engaged in maintenance and repair, but it also has to include a reform of how ODOT operates, efficacy and efficiency. There needs to be a reform. We need to understand that the counties and cities actually do a better job, sometimes not perfect, but a better job of taking care of roads. So as we go through this, I intend to be connected and involved. I thought there were a lot of bad things that our friends prevented happening. Some of the bad things did happen. And I want to encourage you to talk to your business friends in suburban areas around Eugene and around Portland. They need to start looking at those legislative races. They need to start talking to the moderate Republicans who actually got elected and let them know their business constituencies are watching and would like them to form a coalition with other moderate legislators to stop the bad stuff from happening. And when you talk about trying to get the word out about Oregon, I still remember Tom McCall. Please visit, but don't stay. First kind of message. I noticed that when I was in Virginia. That was something that drew us out to check out Oregon. That kind of marketing still needs to be done. On the public safety side, I will do one other initiative. Eliminate catch and release. This was insidious legislation passed in 2022. I wasn't there yet, which basically told the Chief Justice to come up with a list of felonies and Class A misdemeanors where the presumption is you were released on your own recognizance as soon as you're booked. It is, the nice word phrase I'd use is ill-advised. More bluntly, it's stupid. The traditional thing is someone gets arrested for a serious crime, and in the old days, you were held until you were arraigned in front of a circuit judge who looked at your record, looked at the charges, considered the safety of the public, considered the safety of the victim, and decided whether you should be held pending trial. You don't do that anymore. Now, on some cases, like it's a violent crime, they'll still hold you. But otherwise, burglary, identity theft, auto theft. Oh, gee, you're a nice person. We're going to let you go as soon as we book you. That is stupid. And I did have legislation to undo it. And I found out the powers that be don't want to touch that. So you will see an initiative to eliminate catch and release. And it will say people have to be held until they are arraigned, and the judge has to consider these factors and determine whether they should be held pending trial. And by the way, that legislation also took away the power of judges to set bail in a lot of instances. Now, they'll be re-empowered. And I'm giving you a speech on it because we're going to file that in the next few days also. Only 2 initiatives. Sometimes you go outside the legislative process. Ending catch and release will have tremendous public support, but there's more. I know that the counties are limited in funds. They can't afford to pay for all this. Guess what? This will say the state has to reimburse the county for the cost of incarceration. So it'll be the state paying for it. And can it be done? We did it in 2010 when we said on your 3rd conviction for drunk driving, you had to serve at least 90 days in the county jail. The state has to reimburse the county for those 90 days. And they're still doing it. They tried to get out of it in 2023. I found out and I said, no, the law says it was like $1 million they hadn't sent to the counties. What I'm saying, if we pay attention to these things, on the public safety side, there's got to be an agenda. On the tax side, we need to be watching out. General fund can be used for some of the stuff, including the wolf predator situation. Don't attack the lodging tax, which should be used for marketing. All right. What I'm trying to get at is instead of talking about a dozen issues, I want you to know I did get an estate tax reform bill through, improving what we had done. I got a housing bill through. There's several other things done, but also being a collegial member, I got some good stuff for our community in terms of that called a Christmas tree bill. Well, I went in and I said, we need money for the Kaiser Rapids Park. We had a $750,000 appropriation so they can keep establishing facilities there. The Willamette Heritage Center, what we used to call Mission Mill Museum, they have a $3 project. I got $750,000 appropriated for that project. The B-17 Alliance at the airport, they need 700,000 more to be able to take over that entire hangar. I got a $350,000 appropriation to help them. There's some other things I couldn't do, but because I'm collegial and I sit down and I don't call people names, I'm not angry with people.
I didn't do that.
What I'm saying is there are some left and right wing legislators who are into name calling and complaining. It won't work. And I'll stop with this. And this is my wrap up. When we passed the Christmas tree bill, which is a lot of special appropriations, there was a legislator from Portland who stood up and complained. This bill doesn't do this. This bill doesn't do that. I'm thinking, by the way, she's a liberal Democrat from Portland. Where was she? I'm sorry. I listened to all of that, and I wasn't going to speak to the bill, but I stood up and I remember the Rolling Stones. If you can't always get what you want. And I said, to quote the Rolling Stones, you can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. But if you try real hard, sometimes you get what you need. I couldn't resist saying that. And then I said, this bill does a lot of good things for a lot of engaged people and societies. And we should be pleased with that. And sure, there's more to. And that's the message I'm trying to get across. We're not going to succeed every day, but I promise you I will remain engaged every day. And I have one last thing, 30 seconds. I've been asked. No, I've been asked about the Senate because Tim Thatcher is not able to run again next year. And I've talked to her. She's not stepping down early. She says it doesn't matter. I decided I need to be committed to my district. I'm not interested in running for that Senate seat. I want to run for reelection to my House seat, which is Kaiser in North Salem. I'm going to need your help. And when we do these initiatives, I'm going to need your help. And what I promise to do is to stay engaged, to listen, sometimes admit that I made a mistake. You already heard from me about the transportation because that was a mistake. I was trying to be engaged. I went a bridge too far. We're going to go back. But with your support, we need to get the message out about the good things that need to be done. We need to push back. We need to deal with broken windows, downtown safety, and I'm here to help. Thank you.
Representative Mannix. And I appreciate you addressing, as I shared with you, I've never had so many calls come in as quickly asking me what has happened to Representative Mannix.
It was a committee vote, not a floor vote.
I just want to thank our membership for paying attention. I was inundated with phone calls within about a 3-hour period, asking what just happened. And I have peers like Ryan Trevor in the room, Justin Martin and others who were just fielding an enormous amount of calls on that vote. And I appreciate you addressing it here. Questions on the legislative session for either Greg or Representative Mannix? Yes.
I do. Representative Mannix, can you please speak to Bill? I think it's 205. 205.
Is this the mental health bill?
And also about the consortium, what's going on with that. So I think that's a lot of stuff that's happening in the background that affects our catch and release as well. I think we just had an update, right, to Womack about what's going on with some of the cases that are being dismissed.
Got to get to the question here if we could.
House Bill 2005 has to do with several subjects, all relating to mental health as the center point. And the good part of the bill is that we've made it easier to get civil commitment for people that are mentally troubled. We have some of the toughest standards in the nation. We have simplified those standards so people can be civilly committed. At the same time, we've dealt with what I call the federal court issue relating to the state hospital, and more defense attorneys letting their clients say that they can't aid and assist in their defense because of their mental issues. And so then they have to be sent to the state hospital to be evaluated and then treated, trying to treat them to the point where they're able to aid and assist in their defense. There are a number of provisions put into this legislation that set timelines and adjusted things so that we can try to address these issues more aggressively. And there'll be questions as to whether or not this will satisfy the federal court. So those things are pending. In the meantime, though, in terms of the public defense system, we've had private consortia that have been doing public defense work. What is that? Groups of private attorneys doing the public defense work. And there was an expiration date set for their opportunity to do this, as opposed to, say, the Multnomah Public Defender, which is, I'll call it a government nonprofit, and local attorneys. We extended the lives of the consortia. Why? They're doing a better job, cheaper, then guess what? Government. Why are we not surprised? So we've opened that door up. So we have a chance. We don't have the facilities yet for mental health commitment. And somehow we're fixated on the 16-bed facilities where you can get federal dollars. You can get a waiver from the federal government and expand the facilities. Another half-hour speech that I'll stop.
I want to get a few more questions in if we could. Past President DeHart.
Thanks for being here. Why is it that the efforts to any pharmacy benefit managers to help benefit our local pharmacies die here with so many states in the nation have this reform, and now we're seeing 50 out of 50 in pharmacy availability?
Short answer is the politics of the leadership. And that means the committee chairs really do control the spigots as to what can happen with legislation. And the short answer I have for you is there are a lot of good things that aren't happening because sometimes the leadership doesn't want to do it. And we need to change the levers that we have as to who the leaders are. I thought you were going to ask me about the airport. We did get a good appropriation for the aviation department, which allows us to apply for and get federal funds, FAA funds, to improve airports. And So we did do some, and we used general funds for it rather than raising aviation fuel tax. We stopped that early on. We said, no, we'll use general fund to help our airports. So, and I know I don't want to talk about those Velo protesters showing up at City Hall. Why do we allow 1% to wag that tail to wag the dog? But that's another story.
Incredible opportunity. I'll talk about the thing nobody wants to talk about. We have an incredible opportunity, an airline waiting to come to this community. If we can find 3 years of funding to coax them in. And the destinations are Phoenix and San Diego. Pretty attractive. Phoenix is the one requested location. We've got to get this figured out with our city, and that will be a future conversation. One last question from session for anybody?
Oh, no, Dick Westnell had his hand up.
Well, on the airlines, it's not good that city council say good voice, so it's not working out. I'm tired of the city council of the city or Salem saying good old voice. I wondered if, and that was Vanessa.
Nordag.
Vanessa, I mean, she said. Anybody's got it. Headwinds of Intech, who just got $1.5 billion from Indiana, or Intel, who just dropped off 560 people last 2-3 days ago. I mean, our state needs to be aggressive on a welcome to the business. How many people my age who are now living in another state but still own the property here? You know, I came from the old school where a guy would call me up named Jerry Frank and says, you know, what are you going to be doing for our community? I was only 40 years old. So, you know, we need to get really excited about that.
Well, there's two things on that. The two initiatives I'm talking about, we need to send a message to everybody that we're serious about public safety. And when a police officer arrests someone and they get booked, they're going to wait in jail until a circuit court judge sits and reviews the situation, not have a release officer say, have a nice day. The other one is the estate tax. If we repeal the death tax by citizen initiative, that's going to send a message to the business community that there are Oregonians. And by the way, ordinary folks, hey, I paid my property taxes, I paid my income taxes. Now you're going to tax the heck out of me so I can't pass stuff on to my kids. We'll poll it, we'll have to test it. What I'm saying is those two things, if they're on the November 2026 ballot, set the tone. And then we have candidates for governor who are going to be running with that atmosphere around them. There's an opportunity to talk about public safety, taxes, and business.
Sorry, real quick, Dick, to address that, I guess it's pretty indicative of where we are as a state when there's all this hand wringing over ODOT doing layoffs, but not a word about Intel and their layoffs. I mean, it just tells you exactly where we are, and that needs to change.
Yeah, I mean, we're losing businesses in the state at record amounts, according to the data. This is a time where there needs to be a major reset in mindset in both, and that's a nonpartisan issue. We are going to lose our economic foundation and tax base as we keep having these policies. Representative Mannix, thank you for your work during the session. Greg, it was great to partner with Orla as usual.
Thank you for your forgiveness.
Yeah, well, I tried to provide you a little bit of buffer, but I will be honest, I did not get through to all my members that everything is okay now. We are, as an organization, had record participation on your behalf in this session. Jameson, how many? I know you have the count of.
It was 33.
So we provided testimony on 33 of the bills that directly affecting business in this area, as well as I was one of the featured presenters for a couple of caucus. Oh, you can use the restroom, yes. We're going to switch gears now and talk about something very dear to this organization, that is public safety. We know that our businesses and our customers need to feel very safe in coming and gathering, eating, dining, being out in our community. And you may wonder why the Salem Chamber, which represents businesses all over our region, but primarily in the Salem area, would be so focused just on the downtown in a moment like this. It is statistically proven that cities that are healthy, their downtown is healthy. And when a downtown is not healthy, you see the rest of the community not being healthy. So understand that our organization is very deeply vested in public safety and the welcoming atmosphere of our downtown core. And I'd like to hand it over to Chief Womack to talk about some of the strategies that the Salem Police Department and City Council are considering.
Thanks, Tom. And thanks everybody for having me. Good to see some familiar faces and some new faces. Happy to be here, talk about this important topic. Had a recent meeting with some downtown business owners through the Main Street Group Association. So thanks for hosting that. There was probably 70 people in the room, I'd imagine, and more. And I got to kind of check and hear from that group what they're experiencing, which I already know. We're experiencing the same thing. Our officers are dealing with it all the time. But I started out by asking a question. One of the prompts that I had for this was, what is the Salem Police Department experiencing downtown? What are the systems problems and issues? And I answered that with a question to the group. What are you all experiencing? I talked about there's basically 3 levels of crime. When you talk about crime in general, you've got your violent crime, right? Where persons crimes, where people get shot or stabbed or injured, where they're physically hurt, the most serious crimes, I think. Then there's kind of a middle tier level of crimes where they're property crimes, very serious, but obviously they're ranked below violent crime, where people are breaking into businesses or stealing a car, stealing things from your home. And then there's these lower tier crimes, not that they're not important, but they're the lowest level crimes are like nuisance crimes, like trespassing, those type of inappropriate behaviors that happen sometimes. So if you think about crime in that way, I asked a few questions related to those. And I asked this group, out of everybody in the room, how many of you personally or a close friend or relative have experienced or observed or witnessed a violent crime, someone being shot or stabbed or assaulted or threatened with physical injury? And probably 75% of the hands in the room went up. This was, I asked within the last year. I asked a second question about property crimes, and that more hands went up. And when I asked about those nuisance crimes, and I gave some very specific sobering examples, not to be too crude this early in the morning, but how many people have witnessed totally inappropriate behavior down around your businesses, including things like nudity or public defecation or urination, needles, drug use, and all the hands went up. All the hands went up. So my answer is that's what we're experiencing too. That's what our officers are dealing with also. And in so many ways, our hands are tied. And what got me thinking about this today was what you just said. Also, I have to speak to it. I hear from our business community the theme a lot of times that we aren't in a business-friendly environment. Right? I see a lot of heads nodding. Sometimes you get asked, what does that mean? Like if somebody asks me, I'm not, my hands are tied in law enforcement, or I'm not in a police-friendly environment right now. What does that mean? Well, this is an example of bail reform. And I'm not a political person. I'm not an elected official. I have to be careful actually about being political. I'm very intentional about being apolitical. So I don't publicly advocate for certain legislation or anything like that. But when you initiate a law for bail reform that forces jails to release people immediately, that doesn't allow us the same tool we had before to break cycles on some of those lower level crimes. Now, if someone shoots somebody in our community or kills somebody and we arrest that person, that's a measure 11 offense. They're going to be held in custody, which they are. But you start going down that rank order that I was talking about, those mid tiers, there's a maybe will be held, maybe not. Those low tiers will never be held in jail, never. And so what on the street, the way that plays out for officers is when you get called into those situations by business owners who are experiencing very real inappropriate behaviors that are low level crimes, there's nothing that we can do except basically cite and release, right? And so you're unable to break that cycle like we used to do. And I'm not an advocate for heavy-handed policing that, arrests are going to solve these problems. That's not what I'm saying. But sometimes you do need to use these tools to interrupt cycles and help manage problems. Those tools are taking away from you. It's frustrating for everybody. And unfortunately, a lot of times we end up speaking to it, even though I have no control over that process, right? I didn't make that change. Just dealing with the consequences. We're the front end contact with the business owners that are dealing with those things, my officers. And the officers are frustrated too, because there's really no tool they have anymore to try to manage that problem, solve that problem. And so I just wanted to speak to that at a high level. When you say you're in a unfriendly business environment, you probably have some examples. And when I say for probably 10 years now, I've been doing this for 33 years as a cop. The highest honor has been the last 4.5 years serving as your police chief. It's the highest honor of my career. But it's been about a decade where I feel like I'm not in a law enforcement friendly environment anymore for multiple reasons. And you can think of that. Someone just mentioned a protest at a recent council meeting. That's an example of the voices that are being expressed and influencing that are completely incorrect and inaccurate, portraying things that we did not do, and that's not being countered or spoken back to in an appropriate. So we're operating an environment with extreme challenges where in many ways our hands are tied as far as the traditional tools that we had. So I just wanted to put that out there. I'm not going to be gloom and doom today because I actually have a hopeful message today. We're in a different environment right now. But what we passed around, I do want to start out with just some facts about staffing and the state of crime in the city generally. And so just real quick talking points. Out of the Oregon's 8 largest cities, we're the second largest city in the state, correct? We have the lowest staffing ratio of Oregon's 8 largest cities. And so per capita, I've got less cops than, all 8 other cities. We're at the bottom of 8. We have the second highest violent crime rate. We're only behind Portland. Sometimes we think about this beautiful city we're in, and we're not really aware of how intense our crime problem is here. But the sobering fact is we have the second highest violent crime rate in Oregon, and I have the 8th highest staffing ratio for the largest cities. And so just that, I get asked a lot about your staffing, and every police chief will say, I'm understaffed, I need more resources. Just those facts alone show what our officers do every day is they work harder than all the other cops in Oregon. They're doing more with less, and the violent crime has been trending up for about 10 years without staffing increasing at all. And so what's happening is you're chipping away at some of the proactive things that we used to do. And so what the result of that is something like downtown. And the most difficult decision I've had to make since I've been here is the elimination of the downtown bicycle team. Those teams are proactive policing teams. They're like community policing teams. They're free from calls for service, and they're engaging the community and business owners, and they're getting to know everybody. They're getting to know people that are doing the right thing, and they're getting to know the people that are doing the bad things. And they're managing those relationships in a proactive way. So they're more effective at managing a lot of those low level issues that I was talking about. But when you're constantly pulled into more intense violent crime without more resources, you end up retracting to your core services. And we got to the point where that 8-person bicycle team had dwindled down to a 4-person bicycle team. And then finally, I just needed those 4 people back on patrol to handle emergency calls for service. And in January, I had to make that decision to just eliminate a long-term downtown community policing team. We are retracting to our core services. We are a reactive agency, but we're a damn good reactive agency, I'll tell you that. But we're not a proactive agency anymore. And a lot of these issues we're talking about, you need some proactive resources to deal with. And so when I've advocated for more staffing from the police department, that's where I'm coming from. Try to deal with some of those issues in a proactive way. Let's get ahead of some of these problems now and not just be a fast responder that solves the crime, which we're really good at. We need to be ahead of those things and be proactive. We need to build relationships again with the downtown business owners and the rest of our business owners. We have 2 glowing hotspots in Salem. This is just the data. We did a 5-year gun violence summary. All of our calls for service. This is the same thing for the fire department. When you look at where their calls are and where the intense levels of issues are, it's downtown generally, and it's northeast Salem, right? And it's a high need, high demand areas that we need to have some proactive work done in. So the good news here is that this is a much different conversation we're having today than it was just a few months ago. For the past 2 budget cycles as a city, I've been scared to death that I'm going to lose more staff. I knew I wasn't going to gain any. I was worried about cuts. And luckily we survived most of that. I did lose 5 positions 2 budget cycles ago. 4, I'm sorry, were cut. Sworn positions, so we went down a little bit. But then we held steady. But thanks to all of you, thanks for the advocacy as well as far as the levy that passed. What that did for community services was it kind of replenished the general fund enough to where now we're not talking about cuts to public safety. And we're talking about if and when there are some new revenues, or if and when we find more efficiencies, how do we use those to replenish or restore? Or what does public safety look like now? Instead of cuts, we're talking about where we can go over the next couple of years as far as improving public safety. And so now that's the conversation we're having. So there was a city council meeting a couple of weeks ago. There was a few protesters there, sir. But there was also a presentation. The Mayor Hoy asked for the police chief to talk about specifically on the police side, how could we increase police presence downtown, just generally speaking. So at kind of a high level, I presented three options there. The immediate one would be use salary savings, use overtime to immediately inject more resources into our two hotspots. Okay, just the downtown and that Northeast Salem area. That's happening right now. We're implementing it this week. So you will see you're not going to see a downtown bike team out there again, but there will be some additional resources on overtime in the downtown area and in Northeast Salem, focused on what the data is telling us we need to focus on, when and where, and building more relationships with people again. So that's happening right now. That's huge. And I appreciate the city manager for making that decision, because traditionally we were not allowed to use our salary savings for my own purpose. So I'm budgeted, salary savings are vacant positions, right? I'm hovering around 10 vacant police officer positions. By the way, we had 26 2 years ago. We're making great progress in a very challenging environment with replenishing our ranks. But when you have 10 vacancies, they're worth about 185,000 each. You're talking about $1.9 million worth of salary savings for unfilled positions. That used to just be used to help balance the general fund. I didn't get to use any of that. Now the policy is I get to use that overtime to try to fill the gaps for those vacancies. And so that's what we're doing. I've authorized to use that money to re-inject some resources into downtown and Northeast. That's positive. It's not a long-term solution, but that is a positive move in the right direction. Near term, what I mentioned was, if I could only ask for two positions in our department, they would be for HST. That's the Homeless Services Team. This is a team we created a few years ago that are just only two police officers, but they're partnered up with a city cleanup crew, the SOS team, they call it. So you've got your homeless service teams and your cleanup crew that work together, but they're not 7 days a week because there's only two officers. And so 4 to 5 days a week, we're out there, and these officers are really good at engaging people, building relationships, and they know the whole array of services that are out there and way to connect people to resources. So for our unsheltered community, our unmanaged encampments, which are unlawful camping and so forth, which are problematic, they're not going to be held in jail. Keep in mind, it's not like we can just arrest people and put them in jail. I can't even take them to jail for that, just so you know. So we have to manage the problem. So having those two officers dedicated to that work is important, because there are public safety issues surrounded around unmanaged camping situations. Those are unsafe, health and public safety. So we need that 7 days a week. So my long story short here is I need 2 more police officers so that I can have 4 HST officers, another cleanup crew, so that 7 days a week we can more actively manage that problem. This isn't going to solve the problem. Sometimes the pushback I hear is, why would you invest in expensive police officers when really people just need housing and services and we need to get them? I agree. There's some long-term solutions that we all need to figure out. But what are we doing right now to manage and mitigate the problem and the issues? You do need to invest in management of the problem too. Too often it's this black and white discussion where police can't solve the problem, so we just need to invest in long-term solutions. Okay, but what's happening right now to all of you and to us that we need to manage and mitigate the issues? That's what HST is about. So my immediate recommendation was, let me use my salary savings for overtime. Midterm was, please, next fiscal year, fund 2 police officers so I can expand the HST team 7 days a week. And then finally, this dog's giving go over here. Longer term, let's refund the bicycle team of some level. You need a downtown, and Tom spoke to it. Downtown safety is so important. Perceptions of safety are so important. And if we have a proactive community policing bike team down there dedicated to that work, that's beneficial for our downtown, it's going to benefit the whole community. So let's find a way to fund another 8 positions or so a year or 2 out so we can replenish that bike team. This is all going to take some work and some time. Once you pull back on things, it's really hard to rebuild them, but we need to get there. And so there was that short-term, near-term, and longer-term recommendation came from me. And now we're going to have a more robust conversation on the 21st. There's going to be a council work session on specifically downtown and Northeast safety. And so that'll give the city councilors a chance to be in a little bit less formal setting in a work session and actually ask each other questions and ask staff questions and try to give us a little bit of policy direction on where they'd like to see us go to develop some strategy and policy on public safety. So that's the next step in this process. There's also going to be Courtney Knox-Bush from the city manager's office is convening a business meeting. Since we met with downtown businesses, we're going to meet Pastor area businesses with the next week or 2 before that work session. And so you might see some information going out about that as well. And I would just encourage businesses that have an interest in that area of town to show up at that meeting so staff can gather them too. And input, what I'll say is your voices are being heard. Especially, I can speak for myself. Hearing what you're saying, I'm listening, and it's being incorporated. Matter of fact, we took notes from the last meeting we had. And the things we heard, and that was an attachment to that staff report that went to the city council. So that voice is actually being expressed to the council. It's being captured in the record. I just want everybody to know that when we say we're listening, it's not just falling on deaf ears. We're actually taking the input and trying to make sure our counselors are aware and we can be responsive to that as much as possible. So again, I just want to emphasize that we're in a whole different environment, at least, that allows for a much better conversation just a few months ago. I'm not worried right now about losing staff. I'm thinking about if, and there is hope. So Representative Mannix mentioned we're always going payment in lieu of taxes from the state multiple times, failed once again, but the city's not going to give up on that. It's going to continue to push on that. And any amount of revenue that comes in from the state is going to help the situation. There's also things like operations fees. There's other ways to adjust revenue a little bit as a city now that we've kind of replenished the general fund a little bit. We're also talking about the URAs, right? I think I'm not an expert on this, but there's one that is going to close. I think there's another one we might shut down that redirects tax money back into the general fund. So yes, levy was for community services, which replenished the general fund and made it more healthy. But now what are the other options to bring in a little bit more in that could be directed towards police and fire and public safety, these traditional services that we need? So we are in a different environment right now. I'm very appreciative of that. But this is also the time when you need, as you said, sir, to be active and have your voice heard in a very powerful way. Because if there is revenue, people, go after that in many different ways. And so we need to make sure that your priority, how you would like to see the city spend its revenue or use the revenue, is heard. You're present and you're active and engaged. So this is the time to make sure that you are heard and continue to advocate. With that, I just would happy to take some questions.
Brian, in decent order, maybe just because he's closest to me, we'll start with Brandon.
Chief, thanks for being here. What you have to deal with the officer ratio to. Question is this, as a small business owner, in one location just outside of the main downtown area, we've had break-ins, we've had drug use in the parking lots, we have living in the parking lot, customers are not, they're a little afraid of coming in at times, certain times of the day. And we've had gangs around the areas. Obviously, with that, all the crime that comes with that. In addition to that, we've had clients that have had fraud. Those individuals have been arrested and released immediately, and they found that they were back, with hundreds of other people falling prey to this fraud. We have accidents in front of our business that are either distracted driving or drug abuse, you name it. The question to you is, how do you look at everything that we're talking about? A lot that's visual in our face, and a lot that no one in this room really understands is still going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Fraud. How do you prioritize the needs for our community with the resources that you have to not even to show us that we're safe, but even to give us the perception that you are responsibly attacking each area?
That's right.
What's your most important?
Yeah, I would say, so this is a challenging question. So much need everywhere and everybody has a different definition of safety, frankly. This group will give me a certain perception on what safety means. If I go out into a neighborhood, sometimes in certain areas, it might be loud mufflers on cars or people doing donuts in a parkade. It just depends who I'm speaking to at the time, what their top priority is for public safety. So as a police chief, I end up having to kind of I listen to everyone, but I'm making decisions based on the type of crimes. We don't have the proactive resources anymore. And so we're forced to be drawn into violent crimes, like being reactive to violent crimes. We are very good at it. We have a highest clearance rate, a very high clearance rate compared to the national average across the board in all types of crimes. We're really good at solving cases. We are, but it takes resources to do that, to keep up with that. I got to make sure officers can get to calls quickly, especially the serious prioritized calls, and then we can follow up and then we can investigate them and we can solve them and bring justice to victims. That's resource intensive. And that's what's sucking up the majority of our resources. That's why you see the bicycle unit disappear. So that's how I'm making decisions. I'm just being forced without additional capacity. I'm just being forced into more violent crime type responses or serious property crime responses at the expense of some of the nuisance crimes or the low level things that are happening. And then the other piece is just so out of my control. Even if we do follow up on a fraud, multiple thefts, there's no break in the cycle. Yeah, we're making an arrest, yay. but then there's no accountability or the cycle's not interrupted at all. So the same people are doing the same thing. Sorry to go off a little bit topic, but the state at least is coming up with some organized retail theft grants. We've got some of that last year. Hopefully going to get some more this year. And we've used that to increase automated license plate reader cameras, for example. So we try to leverage technology for efficiency. Incredible resource. These are cameras out in public view. They're not capturing anybody's privacy issues or anything. This is public streets, catching license plates, and then it immediately tells us this car was, if we know a car's in the system that committed a crime, we're solving cases like crazy, because once we get a good license plate, we'll put it in there. And we'll know this car has been at this intersection 10 times in the past 5 days, and it's always over here. We're finding these cars quickly, or if it's stolen, it's letting us know it's a stolen car. So the technology is helping us solve these crimes also. So we're always looking for new technologies, but we also use some of that money for, petty theft or organized retail theft missions. We've done a couple big ones at the Willamette Town Center. We're talking to our friends with Safeway businesses too that are suffering right now. We're going to do some work with them. So when retailers can partner with us to get some of that work done as far as arresting people for shoplifting. But again, it's a lower level theft that people are just being released for. But we're doing our best to attend to the problem.
Speaking on retail, Alan.
Yes.
Obviously, grocery outlet.
Yes.
Is much of that more to say over the fuel. I've recently been informed that their shrinkage rate has just gone through the shopping. Now I have the pleasure of driving up and parking in front of the store and watching the managing assistant manager wrangling rather agitated individual off the property not too long ago. But
Alan, you got a question coming here?
But my question is that shoplifting going through the roof is, when I think of the price per volume and how many trips, it's really hitting the bottom line. How much of that activity is going on in the store and it's ruining the experience? It is hitting their bottom line.
Good question, Alan.
Question, what can we do about that?
Arrest people and hold them accountable, but I can't hold them accountable anymore. Yeah, so that's the challenging piece that I'm in. So I'm speaking to the two issues that I have so little control over, which sometimes is frustrating for me too. But we understand the problem and sympathize with the problem.
Just as presence, some way to.
Presence, I agree. Let's get it down to the bike team reestablished so they're not a slave to calls for service, and they can maybe have a little more presence at your property and try to work on problem solving with you. That's my recommendation.
Right, public safety for all of us. So you said you're not able to advocate. I don't know if I heard you correctly.
He's appointed, so he's not elected.
Yes.
Yeah. So I advocate through
Please, you know that.
the way
Also, when you advocate for more staff.
yeah. So I do that through Oregon Association of Chiefs of Police. So I can't politically advocate for anything as an appointed official. I work for an elected body that makes policy decisions on what legislation they're going to support. So we have a legislative committee that we go through the process, and then the city council will decide on what the city's legislative priorities are, not any individual department head. So that's how it works within the city. So your city councilors set legislative policy. But for me, the way I do that is through the Association of Chiefs of Police. And so I'm an active member. I'm on the legislative committee there too. And so as a group of police chiefs, we're in the legislature constantly. Kevin with Campbell, constantly, we have a very strong advocate there on our side too. But frankly, the voice is just not being heard. We've been pushed away from the table for far too long. And reforms to policing and public safety were happening a couple of years ago that we didn't even have a voice in anymore, which is unusual. And now it's beginning to change a little bit. Yes.
I think you're able to talk to city council, but I'm saying you actually can't say that one of the reasons you're having a problem enforcing the law, like shoplifting in retail.
I just said it. Yeah. I just said it. I can say that.
You can do that.
I just did. Yeah. I can't go to the legislature and speak at a committee, for example, on that topic. It would be if the council adopted that policy, then maybe staff would advocate for that policy.
So I need to bring a little order. We're to extend for those who can stay. Obviously, that we haven't even got past City Councilor TJ Sullivan yet, and I understand there's a lot of questions. probably on us to do too packed of a program, but we get you once a month. So I would ask that we could, and by the way, we have two very big announcements that we need an audience for. So let's extend till 8:40. I apologize for those. I know some of you may need to leave. Ernesto.
Hey, Chief.
Hi, Ernesto.
Compliment and a question. I saw your people responding to complaints about trespassing in very rapid manner, very patient. So thank you for that. What are you doing to educate business owners to take ownership of their business? Everybody complains that homeless people are sleeping in front of their restaurants, but what do you do to educate people to about the and ask people to leave? In case of retail, owners need to hire people to enforce their own rules. So you cannot rely on your conversation. If you're then shoplifting with candy bars.
No, I agree, but I also am sympathetic that that's an expense for business owners, right? And so there are a lot of business owners that are doing great things with camera systems and private security and extra attention, but that only goes so far too. But we do have ways to help business owners if you're interested in doing kind of a crime prevention through environmental design study. We have an officer that can come out, help you assess your business, make some recommendations on maybe some security and safety measures. That's something that we can offer as well.
Chief, I would say, why don't you send the playbook that you'd like businesses to be aware of, and we will promote that through the chamber.
Perfect. Okay.
Director.
That you can get free money to work from downtown, right? To enhance security of your individual businesses. Some things, also there's a no trespass order that you can file
Yes.
with the police department. Post your property, and oddly, most homeless people are rather respectful when they see your no trespassing sign and the ordinance stated, those are two.
Okay, Brian.
Yeah, Chief, a few years ago, you spoke at our leadership Salem class and you had said that, we're kind of property crime, community, but relatively safe. But I'm looking at the numbers, violent crime, is this going up? If so,
On violent crime or property, what are you asking?
on your chart.
Yeah. So we've seen, and so there's on our website too, transparency portal, which is a fancy name for a website, but there's crime stats on there, and I have a 15-year crime summary that we update every year. So it's kind of a rolling 15 years, and it breaks out all crime, violent crime and property crime. And crime is going down, more flat, because of property crime is underreported and going down, because there's much more property crime than violent crime. You pull out the violent crime, which is murder, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. It's been trending up for about 10 years. Okay, we're starting to see maybe it level off right now again, hopefully, but that's a long-term steady trend line increase in Salem. So it's been this just steady burn of slow increase to violence that's what's happening. I do think there's an issue with reporting property crime. To me, it seems like there's a lot of property crime, but the data isn't reflected. And so I always encourage people to report stuff. What I hear from people when I say that is reported is they say, they don't want to bother me. Our officers are so busy, or nothing's going to be done anyway, so why should I report it? Well, report it. And another quick plug here, we just implemented a brand new online reporting system on our website too. It makes it real easy to report crimes. And so ask you or your employees, whether it's a smashed window or a minor theft, at least do an online report so we have the data. And we use that data to direct resources also. So when we're looking at hotspots of activity, we need that information in our system. So there's a more robust online reporting system that we just implemented as well.
Our elected officials have, quite honestly, at all levels, this has come due to policy and belief systems. And we're in a place that it is not about law enforcement, it's about social causes. And this is just very important to understand. We need to focus as a community on backing up our public safety because it's a foundational need for communities. I had a question. Yes, please.
Organizations that has 2 shelters, 140 bed and then a 40 bed. My question is, and I think you answered it already, was going to be how can we as business owners truly drive more resources? We actually had to put a fence like arches to keep the activity out of the parking lot. So how can we effectively and more readily build more resources within the community as just, I mean, there's a wealth of knowledge in the room.
Yeah.
How can, what, give us homework?
Yeah, I would say so. And here I am to, issues that are traditionally not even municipal government responsibilities. Well, obviously a police chief, I don't build housing, I don't do addiction treatment, I don't do counsel, right? And so, but I speak to these unsheltered issues that are driving problems so often because we're the point of the spear, right? But most of that is county and or state services, right? Housing people, providing addiction treatment. So that's where that needs to be directed. I mean, I can advocate for that as much as possible. There's several things that have happened. The bar for civil commitments over the years has gone so high. So you have a subpopulation within our unsheltered community that's hard to service, resistant to services, right? Maybe 20%. So what you're seeing in your shelters are the lower hanging fruit because people have human rights. I can't force them to go into a shelter. It's a choice to go into a shelter. It's a choice to go into a shelter, right? I can't take people's freedom away for not committing a crime or anything, right? It's a choice to take services. And so you're seeing people through really good engagement and encouragement choosing to take up services and shelter. There's a certain group that won't do that because a lot of times they can't do that. They're so deep in their addiction that they're not going to choose to take up services. And I can't force them to do that. There's no way to force them to do that. It's voluntary. The only way to force someone to do that is civil commitment, right? You're a danger to yourself or others. And so then I have authority to do a hold on you and put you in mental health services. The bar got so high that I can't do that anymore unless you're literally sitting there cutting your wrist in front of me, right?
We just changed that with 2005.
That's the reform that's starting to happen. So that's the advocacy I think needs to happen is how do we encourage, kind of force people to engage in services when they're at their lowest like that. Continue to work on civil commitment and the aid and assist reforms. And that's the reform that's happening right now in the legislature. So we're seeing that conversation is beginning to play out. That will help. But then what happens, even if I could arrest a large number of people for mental health hold and put them into services, where do they go? Honestly, in a secure treatment facility, because it's a secure option. It's not optional. So you need a secure treatment facility, and then we don't have a our state hospital is full of people that have committed crimes awaiting trial, and we can't even get them processed fast enough. So not only do we need the law to change on how we can get people in there, we need the capacity to keep people and hold people, which is very, very expensive, very expensive. So advocating at the county and the state level for that sort of reform and change and funding is going to be necessary. Long answer, sorry, but
If you are interested in sharing your voice to Salem City Council, which darn it, I need a lot more of you there. It is very daunting sometimes to be the only pro-business voice in the room. We need you to participate. TJ, share the vision of Main Street.
Well, I will just say that as a Main Street person, I still read the council
First meeting of that.
packets to see what's on the council agenda. And there was a council motion to move money from the police department into the city manager's office. So I sent a simple email and just said, why are you defunding the police? And one of the city councilors responded to me and said, we're not defunding the police. Okay, English is still my primary language. And when it says that we're moving money from the police department out to the city manager's office, that to me is that's the definition of defunding. And we can't do that. You make dumb decisions long enough and situations get bad. We got to stop making dumb decisions. So Main Street exists to promote downtown. Our goal is to help businesses thrive and to help property owners be full of tenants who are happy to pay the rent. That's our goal. That's why we exist. Christmas, our efforts surrounding Christmas are kind of born out of that mission. We started by talking to business owners, and we found that for a lot of our businesses, they make 90% of their annual budget comes from the day after Thanksgiving to the day before Christmas. That's when they bring in all their extra merchandise. They have their staff there, right? They're putting more out there. If they don't sell more, they don't survive. So we wanted to bring more people down during that point in time to help our businesses survive. And we've seen Christmas take off, right? We've got more people who are volunteering to come down on a Saturday morning and put up Christmas lights. Last last Christmas season, I had a team of students from South Salem High School who are out at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning in a not a great weather day, put up lights, and I thought, you guys are insane for being out here. They were back the next week because they had so much fun putting up lights with us. And it's a good thing for downtown. We hear from a lot of businesses that they feel safer with the lights up, and we hear a lot of complaints when we take the lights down. If you are interested in either A, volunteering, or B, contributing financially to the cost, please see Derek Gilbert over here. Derek's on our board. But Christmas is a huge, important time in this community. One, for building goodwill, and two, for changing a lot of people's perception of downtown. The perception of downtown is, one, it's not clean, it's not safe. The city did a polling of all the businesses in downtown and said, if we were to invest more in downtown, what would you like to see? The top two, clean and safe. They polled residents and said, listen, if you were going to come downtown and shop, what would you like to see? Top two priorities, clean and safe. So when the city implemented the new beep beep Salem with the parking meters that are going in, by the way, you need to download that up and be ready to pay. I thought today, there's a parking tax that all the downtown businesses are paying. And I was like, okay, well, they're keeping the parking tax in place. I think they are going to collect an unbelievable amount of money from the parking meters. It's my own personal belief. So I was like, okay, well, they're going to tackle clean and safe. So I talked to the city and said, okay, so what are we going to do about clean and safe? Nothing. And I was like, no. We've talked to everybody. Everybody knows clean and safe are the two priorities. So what are we going to do? Celia Ritter, who owns Ritter's and Wild Pear, she showed up one morning to start their day, and somebody had been sleeping in their front section there and had been using it as a restroom. And so they are like, well, this is not, I mean, I don't know how many of you eat in the restroom when you eat lunch, but it's not a great look or thing to walk through on your way into a restaurant. So they sent one of their staff out to clean it. And the person then threatened to kill their person. And it was a traumatic episode. This employee who then said, look, I got to go home. I can't work today. And I was like, well, we can do better than that. We need to have a downtown clean team. So we, as Main Street, came up with a letter and a proposal to the council and said, listen, since you're double dipping with no idea what you're doing with the money, let's put a little bit of money into keeping downtown clean. We know that everybody's asking for it. It's not that hard. We'll be out from 3 to 5 in the morning with a clean team, vacuuming up everything that doesn't belong down there, refreshing the bark dust, and then pressure washing with detergent on the sidewalks to keep it clean. And Tom rightly brought up to me, well, what about downtown residents who are trying to sleep? And it'll be noisy, but it'll be a gentle whir inside. Outside, it may be a little bit more noisy. It may not be the best place to sleep. And I know a lot of people are broken up about that, but our goal is to clean the sidewalks and make it so that when Celia shows up to operate her business in downtown, which is a critical business, I think, her and her staff are ready to go and they can operate effectively. So that's our goal, is that moving forward with the city, we want to be partners with them and helping to keep the city clean.
Thank you for your work in that group. Couple key things. We are on the precipice. Our Leadership Salem application window closes at the end of this week. I share that if you have not yet considered going through the Leadership Salem cohort, it is absolutely a phenomenal experience. And you may think, oh, I'm not quite so young in my career anymore. It's not designed like that. It is all ages, everybody welcome. You do not have to be a Salem Chamber member to go through that program. It is about showcasing the best in our community, as well as the challenges, and a very face-forward, educated speakers, community leaders, influencers, elected officials, and the like. The second announcement, which is very critical, and I need you to write this down. On Thursday, July 31st, from 10 a.m. to 11:30, our organization will host a discussion with Chariots. Chariots has the option of applying a employer-paid payroll tax effective in January of 2026 at up to 0.008%. That will be quite a figure for the small business community to be looking at and facing. We need you to be in the room for that conversation. I know Alan and his board will be present to share their perspectives. And we need to share our perspectives of the impact of that on each of your businesses when you think of your employee count. So please mark that on your calendar. It is going to be kind of a special government affairs meeting. We will meet the following Thursday for our normally scheduled meeting in August, but really need your presence and your voice on July 31st. Yes, and you can do the math anywhere in that range. Although to be extremely fair and direct, the transit district has suggested they may be looking at 0.007%. So 0.0001% less. I will say your participation today is powerful. Thank you. We need this room filled each and every month. This is an exclusive benefit for your chamber membership. And often I get asked, hey, I'm not a member. Can I come to that? You cannot. This is what a membership benefit looks like. And this is a packed room of people who care very much about this community. We need to be doubling the size of these events and educating people. So thank you for your thoughtful work and thank you for extending your stay a little longer today. Join me in thanking our panel, and we're a wrap.